Welcome back, everyone. The video you're about to watch is part of a live stream series that I do on Twitch where I teach people how to build an Android app from start to finish by building a task management application. I've removed the episode numbers from the videos because it's designed that each one can be consumed individually. Each week, I pick a particular topic or feature and focus on just that for the live stream. If you are interested in watching the full playlist, check out the links in the description below. But if you just found this one and it intrigues you, I hope you enjoy it and let me know what you think. Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Happy Thursday. Thank you all for coming tonight. Sorry I couldn't make our usual Wednesday night stream yesterday. But as always, I try to reschedule and still get something done throughout the week. Let me get rid of that annoying sound alerts message real quick. Yeah, that's my fault. I still need to organize some sound stuff. But yeah, thank you all for joining tonight. I know today has been a hard day for a lot of people. I weighed heavily the decision about streaming tonight or not, and ultimately what I decided is that I think there's a time and a place for, a good distraction and focusing on some different things rather than consuming all of the terrible media of the day. So I'm still here. We're still going to have a fun, chill coding stream. But that's the reason I didn't tweet out this stream. You may have noticed that. I really wanted to kind of avoid taking up the Twitter timeline from all of the incredible activists out there doing a lot of really good work, sharing ways that people can help, and amplifying the voices of the people who need help the most. So I kind of stayed away from promoting the stream today. But now that we're here, I figured I could use a distraction. Maybe some of y'all could use a distraction. So we're gonna do some coding for a little bit and hopefully have a good time. And that's kind of what I want to say about that. So let's talk about what we're gonna do tonight. Because the answer is, as always, I have no idea. Um, I didn't really get this far. Last week we had a really good conversation on setting up a multi-module app structure. We had like a 3 or something hour stream last week. So I've split that up into like 3 different YouTube videos to go over the different sections that we worked on, like some of the different modules we built and so on. If you are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, go check that out. I'll drop it in chat real quick. Nightbot, are you working? There it is. Um, Yeah, so you can go subscribe over there and you can see the recaps. So I'm publishing them like once a day. So today was the video for the like designing the multi-module structure, and tomorrow it will be like the core models module, and then the next day will be the task, um, like the core data and the task API modules that we made. Uh, and task API test was another one that we made. Um, so I'm happy to talk about that today if people are interested. I also considered uh, continuing that multi-module work today. Because if we pull up, let me see if I still have it. Well, I can get to it on Miro. Um, Here's the module structure that we looked at last week. Um, let's pull it up here. Aha. So there's a whole lot going on here. Um, So this was the idea. We would have our main app module, that is like our Android app. We'd have feature modules that have the UI work specific to a screen, more or less. And then for each one, we'd have like sort of a task API module that would define all of the um, data layer constructs for a task, and then maybe an implementation module that would have like the actual implementation of that data layer, which is not something we've built yet. None of these three are the feature modules or the implementation. But we did get around to setting up like the core data module, the core models module. Um, we did consider making like a core UI module, which is not something we've made yet, but that would be a cool thing for us to work on today. Um, that's my thoughts. So I'm just throwing out some ideas out there. I did have other ideas of maybe some smaller features to work on. I wouldn't mind doing something that's kind of, how do I put this? like not a lot of heavy lifting or brain power involved. So, like one thing I thought of is um, partially could be oops, cleaning up the copy around the app. And like I said, I want this to be like a wholesome task management app, and I haven't really put effort into how do I like sell that wholesome aspect of it and rethinking sort of like some of the copy throughout the app. Um, Another one that had struck me was I'll show you. We have like ooh, I just thought of something I could do. Um, we have these like reschedule and done buttons on each card. And I had the idea that like, well, once you mark something as done, we should probably hide these buttons. And that was a small thing that I thought would take like 30 seconds, but could be like a good thing to work on. And then we could look at like writing tests for that and so on. So I think we'll start there. I know that's kind of a long ramble to get there, but I think that's what I'm going to start with. If anyone watching sort of saw something in the beginning that interests you on the module stuff that you want to revisit from last week, let me know. But why don't we take care of that buttons issue first? Because I'm all ways down for sort of quick ticket. So this is already has a ticket. This is issue number 99. So I look at that because, just as a reminder, I always like to use that for my branch names. So we're going to check out a new branch here, TOA 99. We'll say remove buttons from completed tasks. Um, and let's think about how we can do this. How can we do this? So let's start by finding the UI for this, which is, hey Nevercom, thanks for coming by. Hope you're doing okay today. Um, we've got this task list item composable, and that's what shows this sort of card view that we have on the right. And let's go all the way up to the root here. So this is a material 3 card. Ooh, that could be another thing. There is um, a new material 3 alpha that has a card view inside of it. So we could probably um, use like the actual material 3 card component now. Um, but inside here we have a column. It has some task test and it has like the button row. And so what I was thinking we would do is we would just put some sort of conditional logic here, which I think we can actually do already. If task dot completed, or rather, if the task is not completed, add the button row. Um, and if it is completed, then we should not see the button row. So this, I told you, this would be very quick for us to test. But we can talk about or very quick to do, but let's talk about how we could test this or even modify our previews. Something we did in a recent stream is we looked at how you can supply multiple parameters to the same Jetpack Compose preview, so you can see different versions of something. Um, and that was like by using this preview parameter annotation and specifically creating some sort of preview parameter provider that contains like a value, these values, these list of items uh, that should be returned for that parameter. So the reason I bring that up is because we have this task list item that right now it only has, if I look at the preview, it just has one task list item preview, and this is how it renders. But now that we're getting into this area where we have like two different configurations based on the task, I think it would be a good idea to do the same thing here and have like multiple tasks that are rendered as part of this preview. So to do that, just to recap, we can create a class. Let's call it task preview parameter provider. Parameter provider. Oh my god, I can't type today. And this will be preview parameter provider of type task. And we need to override these values. I can also make this private. This is specific to this preview. Um, and let's do this. So what I would do is like set up like an incomplete task. I'm actually going to copy this one from up here. And we'll put that in there. And then we can have like a completed task be like incomplete task dot copy. Um, Here we'd say completed equals true. And then what we can do is we could just return sequence of, and then we could do incomplete task, completed task. So now that we've set up that parameter provider, the way we use that inside a Jetpack Compose preview is, well, first we add an annotation, or we add a parameter of the type that we want, but then also we need to make sure this gets annotated with preview parameter, and then we give it the provider class name. So task preview parameter provider class. We can get rid of that there, and then the rest of the preview can stay the same. So what you'll see after I do a build and refresh here is we'll see not just one preview, well, for night mode and day mode, but we should see for each night mode and day mode, we should see a completed task card preview and an incomplete task card preview. So we'll give Gradle a minute to build and verify that. But we're already cruising in the first like 15 minutes. We've done a ticket. But we can also we can talk about testing for this. I think this would be really good to write some tests for. Um, I also think there's potentially some different ways that I would structure this list item based on some other experience, but I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole today. Um, Namely, the idea that, like, so this right now consumes a task, which is something that's in our core models module that has, like, a task ID, a description, like its schedule date, and whether or not it's completed. And this is all sort of bare bones, primitive types information about a task. And what I've seen some other apps do is they want to separate that sort of pure domain logic from how an item is rendered to the UI. So we could consider making like a task display model that is purely, information about how a task could be rendered to the user interface. And then that display model would be passed into um, this composable, and we would change the properties to be a little more readable in terms of the UI. So instead of doing like an if not task completed, this could instead be something like if display model.show button row. And you can see by the way that reads, we've sort of decoupled the logic so that if there's any other condition about why we should or should not show a row of buttons, we would have that. It's something we could look at if we have time, but I have a render problem. What happened here? Uh, let's try to refresh the layout because I don't think I have any issues. Huh. This is a fun start. Um, if I click details, will I get more information? I don't have anything yet. Classic. Um, hmm. Oh, it's still refreshing. The IDE could just be slow today. We could also, another way to test this is we could actually run it and we could see how it renders on the actual device um, and see how that goes. Yeah, because apparently that's faster than my Compose previews. Or it'll crash if I have an actual issue. Interesting. Aha. Well, wait. No, this is wrong. This didn't work. This task is completed, so why did the button row show up? Let's run this again. Let's hit the debugger and see what happens here. I wonder if maybe I need to do a rebuild if something got cached funny. Okay, so the task is completed, true, yes. So the button row should not be there, but it still is. Let's do a rebuild. Maybe we have some weird caching issue. Classic Android experience. Hi, is that Soy Llamas? Thank you for coming by, and I'm glad you enjoyed the content. Welcome to the stream. Right now, we are just working on a quick little thing on. I have these like done and reschedule buttons that show on each task, and what I want to do is hide those buttons when I mark a task as completed. Um, because if I've truly marked it as completed, then it makes sense that I wouldn't need to modify it any further. So I'm trying to get rid of that. Um, we could think about if there is something that should appear when it's a completed task, because, like, I don't know, maybe I mark something as done accidentally or I check off the wrong item. Like, maybe we want to provide people a way to sort of undo that. Um, and we could look at different ways to do that. If anyone has thoughts on that, let me know. Um, this idea is really doing work today, huh? Um, okay. That was, I think, the clean or the rebuild. So let's run again. Okay, here we go. Restarting. Let's see. Okay, so this worked. I'm not sure I'm in love with how small this card is now, but maybe that's just a mental thing. Um, because I'm so used to seeing these larger cards. But I guess this makes sense. Um, what do y'all think? Do you like this idea? Do you feel like we're headed down the right path here? Um, let's see if our composed previews are. Those actually, this refreshing still shows like it's happening. Can I cancel this? I don't think I can. So we're just going to ignore that. Um, let's go ahead and commit this, what we've got so far. So, um, ooh, we could ignore all those unversion files. That's a separate thing here. Um, what did we do here? Removing buttons from completed tasks as part of number 99. And that's a cool trick. I bring this up every time in case people don't know. If you're using GitHub, and specifically if you're using like GitHub issues, and you put like number sign plus the issue number right there, GitHub will know to link that commit and that issue or that pull request together. Um, so once this gets pushed to GitHub, I can show you what that looks like. Um, we'll just have to wait for this to run. I've got some Git hooks running in the background, which is why this might seem like it's pretty slow Git integration. Hi, Ron. We are, so right now I just worked on this small ticket I had to, if I've got like these task list items here, and you see I've got these buttons to like mark a task as completed. It used to be that when I marked it as completed and it went to this bottom row, these buttons were still here. So I'm working on hiding those buttons when a task is completed, because if I've completed it, there's no need to keep interacting with it, is the idea. So when I click done here, that moves down and the button row disappears. So, oh, and just to show y'all the thing I just referenced about the thing, so now you can see when I push that commit, it'll say I added a commit that referenced this issue 20 seconds ago, and then it links to the commit that I just made. So before we make the pull request for this, though, let's do some testing. I always like showing off some Jetpack Compose testing. Um, and I think there's two ways we could consider testing this. So one is we could, um, words. We could consider like rendering the whole home screen, clicking the done button, verifying that it moves and that the buttons disappear, which actually, now that I've said that, I think we have um, some tests like that already. Uh, yes, let's talk about these. So, interesting. Oh, well, huh. I guess there's a couple different ways we could look at this. So we have like this one task that says like, I guess here we go. We have a task that says render with no incomplete tasks. And what we do is we have, a list where incomplete tasks are empty and completed tasks is just one test task. And then we make some assertions about that UI. So we verify here that the empty state is visible. And then we verify here that our completed task is also visible. And what we could do is we could extend this to also make an assertion. Because there's a completed task, we could say assert no button rows visible. So, hmm. Um, I'm trying to wonder. So this gives us the node that we want. That is, well, this gives us the text, or hold on. What does this give us? The completed task tag gets applied to the actual task list item. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying find this item with this tag. This is the expected tag. And I'm saying assert is displayed. I think what I can do to just expand on this is I can do like assert. Is there anything about child? Well, there's just assert, I guess. And then I could say has child? Has any child? Um, how do I invert these though? Is there like an assert not? Um, I'm thinking of something like this. So, but here, this is the opposite. This is of what I want. This is saying assert that that the card view, basically, assert that this card has a child with the text done. But I want to invert that, and I wonder, can I just do that? Can you just put a not on a semantics matcher? Um, oh, yeah, I guess you can. Um, so we could try a test like this. So, yeah, assert not has any child with the text done. And I suppose this test could be fooled because what if the task has the word done in it? Maybe I should be more specific and like put maybe a test tag modifier for the button row so that I'm asserting about the right thing. Um, let's do that. So here, when we create the button row, here's a row. We can give this a modifier. Um, and we could do modifier.test tag, and we could just call this button row. Now this will get duplicated for every card, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I think that's okay for the test I'm trying to write. So here, instead of just this has text, we're going to say has any child has tag, test tag, button row. Okay, so when we render with completed tasks, we're saying on the node with this tag, assert it's displayed, and also assert that it does not have any child with the button row. And so in the opposite, where we render with no complete tasks, basically here we have like an incomplete task. We're going to do the opposite. Whoop. That didn't do what I wanted. I want to copy this. So here, where I'm doing a comparison against an incomplete task, we're going to make that same assertion, but here we're going to assert that yes, this should have a child with the test tag button row. Let's try that out. Let's see if those tests work. And if they do, then we can start making the pull request for this. Hopefully this runs. Last time, sometimes when I run from Android Studio, I get weird issues, but I think we'll be okay today. Um, do, 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 do. And we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. But it's looking good. How's everyone doing? Is everyone having a good Thursday? Anyone have anything that they're working on this week? Anything that they're excited about? Um, any cool projects or anything going on? Nice. There go the tests running. Oh, we got one failed. Okay. Um, Interesting. It was the no incomplete tests one that failed. Failed to assert the following, not has any child test tag button row. Has two children, three siblings. Sorry, let's move this over, see if we can learn more. Um, it failed to assert the following. Why did that fail to assert? Um, I think I know why. Ha! Okay, this is a problem with my test case that isn't really interesting. So, check this out. So, when I render this view state right here, I have this list, incomplete tasks and completed tasks. So let me walk you through what actually happens with this piece of code um, when it's rendered. So that happens over in our task list view model, where we um, words where we get like this task list here. Is it in here? Um, oh, it's a little weird here. Um, but in short, what happens is our view model takes the completed tasks and assigns them to this property, and takes the incomplete tasks and assigns them to this property. But when I create it, there's no sort of like type safety to guarantee that the entities in this list are incomplete. Like it's assumed that when they're passed in that is true. But if we look at my test task here, um, it has completed equals false. So even though I'm passing it to the now I've lost it. Um, Even though I'm passing it to the completed tasks list, this entity itself does not have completed task marked as appropriately. So what I need to do here is get like a completed task being test task.copy, and I can say completed equals true. And when I create my list here, I should pass this in. And I should do the same thing with my other test just to be consistent and make sure that if I change my default again, that for each test, I'm making sure that the input is accurate for what we need for that test. So here we'll do the same. So now let's run those tests again, and this time it should fail because now the input to this test is configured in the way that I expect the test to behave. So that was a little tricky, um, but definitely an interesting problem to solve for sure. Here we go again. Looking good, looking good. Nice. 5 out of 5. So let's commit that. We'll say adding tests for task list item. And in addition, though, I also need to update our stream history document. Let's do that before we. Um, so this one, I actually don't know what to put here. Well, at the bottom. So we are on stream 21. Nice. But I don't know what to put for the title here because we haven't really finished stuff. So maybe I'll just put like Misc development. In this stream, we accomplished a few miscellaneous. I have no idea how to spell this word. Will this correct me? Will autocomplete save me? Nope. That's how bad it is. Um, development tasks for the app. But we can put some stuff here. So PRs, so we can say hide buttons for completed tasks. That's one thing we worked on. YouTube coming soon. And yeah, so let's do that and updating stream history. Okay, and then once I will make the pull request, we can talk about other things that we could work on. If there's any other sort of small things that we could do. Maybe we just do a bunch of small tasks tonight rather than having one sort of long running project. Because I have no shortage of work to be done there. Okay, here, removing buttons from completed task list items. So, this fixes number 99. Label on this will be, I guess this could be an enhancement. And the projects, this can go under, I guess we could put this under design. Is that not? Okay, there we go. Yeah, it's the design label on this one too. And create pull request. Nice. So let's review that code that we made real quick. There's not a whole lot going on here that we can ignore. Okay, so for our test cases, what we changed is we corrected the input to make sure that it's accurate to what the test is running. And then for two tests, we added relevant assertions for what we just changed. So we said if we're rendering completed task items, we want to assert that there are no button rows rendered. So there's this not has any child here. And then when we render incompleted tasks, we want to assert that there is a button row here. And the way we made that work is instead of just rendering the button row, we put a conditional statement here where we said if the task is not completed, render the button row. And then on our button row, we gave this test tag modifier so that we could easily check in our test if it exists or not. Oh, and then we modified our Jetpack Compose preview to use this preview parameter so we could render both an incomplete and a completed task. But the IDE is still being weird, so I don't think those previews are rendering. And I don't know if I like close this file, if it's even going to change a difference. Probably not. So yeah. I started to learn MVP, and those interfaces inside another interface is very confusing. Yeah, it MVP as an architecture could definitely be like a lot. Um, I think like sure it has its benefits, but it's definitely a lot to consume all of the layers involved. Um, I'm guilty of it in this project, not so much like in the same way as MVP, but it can definitely be very confusing to sift through all those different layers. Um, okay, So while this is running, I guess we could think about if there's any other issues or any other small things we could work on um, today. So just to recap, like this is basically what we have so far in the app. We have um, the ability, whoops, we have our completed tasks at the bottom and complete tasks at the top. We can add a new task. There is error management on this already, which is pretty cool, like both on the date and the text. So I have to enter both valid text here um, and um, a date that is today or in the future. What I did notice actually that I would like to wait, did I? Oh, I picked a date in the future, so that's why it's over here. Um, what I did think would be good to do is I noticed this earlier in the stream, is we're not doing any sort of words like trimming in in these inputs. So if I put a bunch of spaces here, I can submit. That should not be allowed. Um, and if I put some spaces, but then I actually start typing stuff in, then I should just trim those empty spaces. So let's make a ticket for that, and let's fix that. So let's make a new issue, and we'll say trim task input on creation. Um, Also, if the string is entirely white space, we should display an error. So we'll do that. Let's throw this on the, I guess this can go into the task management project. This will be number 109, and we can, let's do, just check out from here. TOA 109, um, task input. There's a word for this that's escaping me. Um, for like cleaning the input. Sanitizing? I think that's it. Sanitization. You're sanitizing the input. I think that's what it is. Um, so let's. Do we want to try doing some test-driven development here? Do we want to write some tests first? I don't know how many tests we have in place for this. Let's check. Let's talk about um, where all this code lives. So we can start with this add task use case, which is a use case we have to, given a task, we basically want to create it, like add it to a database or some service. This is, well, if we look at the implementation, it consumes a task repository. First thing we do is validate the input, and then if that's a problem, we return that validation result. Otherwise, we try to add the task to the repository. If it's successful, great. If it's not, we have an error state. Um, so let's look at this validate input. So right here, when we're checking for an empty description, we look at the description property and we look at is empty. So there's actually, what empty does is it basically just checks how many characters there are. If there's a non-zero number of characters. Um, but that includes white spaces, including like new lines, which maybe we could. Hmm. I was thinking maybe we could dismiss this altogether. Someone might want a new line, but I don't know. Maybe we dismiss it. But anyways, we look at like what we can do here is actually way easier than it seems. And one of the many beauties of the Kotlin language, if you haven't seen this, get ready to have your mind blown, is blank. There's a built-in function in the standard library in Kotlin that checks for if a string is purely white space. If we look at the implementation here, so it checks first, is the length equal 0? Or it goes through all of them and checks, is this character white space? And so now we would have, if we end up putting in just blank information, we should get an error. So I think actually this use case has a test case already. It does. And so we have this submit with empty description, um, verifying that it gives us a invalid input result. So what I'm going to do to test this as well is I'm going to say submit. I'm going to copy that test, that whole thing. I'm going to change the name to submit with blank description. And here I'm just going to put in a bunch of spaces um, because that's what I want to test against here. And then what I'll do is I will run these tests via the IDE, and we should see that this will fail. Um, Now, this won't do the trimming part that I talked about. So if we look at on the phone here, if we look at like this test, this will still be a problem, but we can fix that in the next commit. It feels good to take a break and just work on um, these small quick fixes. Feels really good. I feel like I've been really digging into some tough problems, both at work and otherwise, on my side projects, that it's nice to just go back to these like 1 to 2 file change PRs. Looks like all of our tests passed, so that's great. Um, so let's do a little bit of test driven development in here. Um, hmm, well, hold on. I want to write. So the next thing we're going to work on, and let's commit this because this is one step. So we could say rejecting tasks with white space descriptions. So that's the first part. Um, so now I'm thinking about the second part of like the idea that we want to strip the white space um, from before and after uh, our task input. And so I'm thinking about sort of where that happens, right? Because it could happen inside this use case. We could say that, you know, before we add it to the repository, we should trim that input. And that's fair. We could also say that maybe that's like logic that happens further up in the UI, and it comes into this um, use case already trimmed. And I think now that I said that, I wouldn't do that because trimming white space from input feels like a business decision. It does not feel like something that should exist in the UI layer. It also means that I have to set up an actual instrumentation test to make sure this works. So I think we can put that code inside this use case here, um, which actually could probably be done uh, like right at the beginning of this invoke. Like, I'm wondering if we. So here's my thought. Let me write it out. Let's see if we like this. So, what I could do is I could call it like a sanitized task, would be task.copy. And here I'm going to say description equals task.description.trim. And what trim will do is it will remove white space from the start and end of a string. And so we could sanitize this task first, and then use that as what gets validated and what gets passed into our repository. Um, I think that would be really good. Uh, so let's let's write a test for this. Um, and let's see here. Uh, So the first thing I can see here is that I don't have any test cases yet that test like a valid scenario. Um, so let's write one, and let's talk about what needs to go in here. So we'll say well, submit valid task um, with white space. Let's call it with extra white space. That's what I'm trying to capture here. And we'll use the run test since run blocking test is deprecated now. Um, and let's see here. So our input task could be something like this. Um, create a task. We'll say our ID is some ID. Description. Let's say testing, but we'll put a bunch of spaces at the end. Scheduled date millis, we could just put 0. Completed equals false. That could be our input task. Um, so we could say our expected saved task would be this input task, copy, but here the description we expect to be saved with is just testing, with no extra spaces here. Um, that's that. So, sorry, let me just look at this. Um, okay, yeah. Um, so those are our inputs. We could say our expected result will be add task results dot success. Our actual result will be use case dot invoke input task, and then assert that actual result that is equal to expected result. Um, and I think, as it's written, I think this works. But the problem is it's not making all the same assertions that we want. Because sure, it's saying that I was able to insert a task successfully, but I want to make sure that the task that was stored in our repository um, matches this one, that it is stored with the updated description. And it looks like this failed. Let's see if we can see why. Um, oh, interesting. Um, was invalid input. Oh, because it's saying scheduled date in past is true. Um, so what we need to do is the scheduled date milli shouldn't have been 0. It should have been like the current time. Um, which this is a whole thing that I need to fix, but that can be a problem for later. Uh, on why we do that. But um, let's run this again. Okay, here we go. Interesting. The test still failed. We got a null pointer exception when we called add task. Oh, because of the way, basically it's because of the way my fake repository works, that I assume that when I add a task, I return this result, right? And I assume that I've mocked the result for that task. So this is a way I can ensure this works as expected. So what I can say is I can go and say our fake task repository. I can say add task results for the expected save tasks. We'll say equals result.success. There. You get it. Um, But so this is a way of sort of implicitly verifying that I'm saving the correct task. Like I could go a step further. I could add a function call here, like fake task repository dot verify task saved, expected save task. I could make this, but implicitly that's already verified because of the fact that I have to mock the response for the creation of this specific task. So my test failed because I didn't do that. Now, this test should pass now because I've mocked the response for that specific task. But if I change this, if my input is any different than this, my test will fail by nature of how the fake repository works. And I don't know if that is like, having said that, I don't know if that's great. Um, I don't know if I should be more explicit, if I should add a verify call as well. Um, I don't know the answer to that. Um, but this works out. I think I'm going to keep it. I think that I'm onto something there. But and we can also just add, just to make sure this works, I'm going to add some white space at the front too, and make sure this does get trimmed properly. Uh-huh. I think this should be good. Nice. 4 out of 4 pass. So we can commit this, and we could say trimming white space from task inputs. That looks good to me, and I think that is worthy of making a new pull request, which means we need to update our stream history file, of course, and another PR here, so we could say sanitize. Whoops, let's not push it. Sanitizing uh, task input, updating stream history, and there we go. That's some good work. Let's see if our other pull request is done. Gasp. We have an X. Our coverage decreased 0.07% on our removing buttons pull request. So let's take a look at coveralls and see if we can find out why our coverage decreased. Interesting. So we can see right here actually um, for the task list item file. Ooh, here we go. So for our task list item file, the coverage decreased. Uh, and the reason for that is actually because we added that preview parameter provider. So you see all this green? This is code that's covered via unit tests. This is not. So we've added a bunch of red code here that is not covered by a unit test. But the problem is, like, that's to be expected because this is, like, not used in a unit test. So I'm gonna ignore this for this pull request, but maybe after I get the other test in as well, we could come back to this because there's some different options we have to resolve a problem like this. Um, from moving the previews into their own file and having that file be excluded from test coverage. There's also a way to create an annotation that you can apply to a function or a class and have that anything with that annotation be excluded from your test coverage report, which is something I do at like the Capsule app. Um, I don't really know, but that might be a cool thing to add to this project because, you know, to me, this is a false flag to say that my test coverage went down because I don't think that that's true because this code's not expected to be covered by a test. So that's just my thoughts there. We'll ignore it for this pull request, but we could definitely maybe once I get the other one we just made set up, that could be the next thing we talk about. Um, Removing buttons from completed task list items. Cool. So let's go to pull request here, and now we can make a new one here. Sanitizing task input. So this one will say fixes number 109. Label here, we could put this one as an enhancement, and the project can be task management, create pull request. We've got conflicts with that markdown file. Those are always easy to resolve. We just got to do that. So, I'm thinking about whether or not I want to take a pause because I think if I go down the rabbit hole of what I just talked about, it could be a good isolated YouTube video. So yeah, I think we'll do that. We'll move into um, removing our Jetpack Compose previews from our test coverage reports. And I'm gonna hard stop right here. I'll go find this point in the video and I will split this up for YouTube. And then we'll do the next part. The next video will have a little bit of this pull request in it to make sure it gets merged, but that could be a separate thing.